Hey there, welcome once again to a Quiet Courage teaching video. And today we're going to be talking about healthy boundaries, what they look like and why they're there. In the last few videos, we've been talking about what unhealthy boundaries look like and how we get to that point. To begin breaking down what healthy boundaries are and why they're here, we need to go all the way back to the beginning, the first book of the Bible, Genesis. And we need to start with God himself. But before we can even talk about what boundaries are, I think it's important to look at what they accomplish. And boundaries, what they do is that they are the conditions in which life thrives. Any form of life, whether it's a garden, right? There are certain conditions under which gardens thrive. And God doesn't necessarily argue with us that boundaries are important or that we should live a certain way. Really, what he does is he creates the ordered universe, the cosmos, and then he places humanity in that and lets him experience the benefit of boundaries. And then the first thing that he does after that is that he gives humanity, Adam, the opportunity to then put boundaries to work. So first he experiences the benefit of it, like God models that for him by creating an ordered universe that is a pleasure to live in. And then he says, hey, Adam, how about you give your hand at it and experience boundaries for yourself? And then also there are consequences to stepping outside of that. It's not just like this gigantic rule book that is placed down in front of us, aka the Bible. It is, hey, let me show you what you're already experiencing. Let me put words to what you've lived since day one and the brokenness that you experienced because of unhealthy boundaries. And also, let me show you what it looks like when people take ownership of their beliefs, when people take ownership of their emotions and their behavior. Let me show you the blessing, the peace, how you can thrive and truly be happy within a certain set of conditions or boundaries that you exist in. So God first does this by looking at himself. Like, why would God create to begin with? Well, because God has healthy boundaries. The triune God has healthy boundaries within himself because what does he do? He looks first at his own beliefs. Why would God create that? His great motivator is love. Love is the reason which he does everything. It's an unselfish choice. He looks at the value of his own character and his own person and selflessly desires to share that with the world. And you can't really experience his love unless there's a space, a place, a condition in which you can experience that character working in and through you, and a place to allow it to be expressed to the world, right? If it's just, I don't know, just an abstract materialist universe, there's nothing really that you can love, that your character has a place to land. So God then creates order within his universe because it was formless and void. It was wild and waste. It had no real substance to it. And so what does he do is he separates the night from the day, or the darkness from the light. And then he takes, well, I'm not doing this in exact order, but paraphrasing, is then he takes, the water from the dry land, and then he takes the sky from the land. And again, he's creating space. He's creating space for life to exist, for things to populate that space. So the night, darkness isn't bad. It's just that it needs a proper place in which it can thrive and conditions in which it can thrive. And so you have stars and the moon, and then the day has the sun, and the water has sea creatures, and then the land has animals and trees and all these different things that are able to be populated within these spaces because there have been boundaries set for within they can actually thrive. So God himself has property lines, so to speak. What are property lines for? Well, your property shows you what you yourself are responsible for. And because he has these property lines, he can say, oh, I'm responsible for my beliefs. I'm responsible for my emotions that are a byproduct of my beliefs. And because of these two working in concert together, they then motivate me into action or to a type of behavior. And he sees that he is responsible for these things. And because he sees the responsibility that he has for the resources within himself as God, he then takes ownership of them and then takes action. And because he has boundaries, because he understands what he is responsible for, he then creates. And because he understands that things can only thrive within set parameters, that he himself has a pre-existent set of parameters within which he exists. And because of that, what he creates is going to be the same, right? So when you have a healthy set of boundaries, property lines, the ability to take responsibility in knowing who you are and what you're responsible for, and you can take ownership of those things, then you'll be able to create. You'll be able to actually love the world around you. And Adam didn't understand this at first. So what we're talking about now, first thing is we're painting a picture of what someone with healthy boundaries looks like. And who is that person? That person was God. And then we looked at the byproduct of having healthy boundaries and how there's a natural overflow or outflow of healthy boundaries being ownership and taking personal responsibility over your beliefs, emotions, and behavior. That, in a nutshell, is what healthy boundaries looks like. But we tried to describe a little bit why that's necessary, and not necessarily by completely arguing the case, but by showing what God did with his healthy set of boundaries is that he then created. Because he had a certain set of parameters by which his own character can thrive by taking ownership of these things, boundaries, then he creates a world through which there can be more thriving, right? And Adam then experiences this firsthand and is invited into a relationship by which he himself can develop healthy boundaries for himself. Really, what we're breaking down here is not just what healthy boundaries look like, but then how to share this with other people, how to help other people develop their own healthy boundaries. We see God modeling this for us, but then if you want other people to experience the same blessing and benefit of living within healthy boundaries, we need to figure out exactly how we're going to communicate that and share it with people. There are three things that are used in developing healthy boundaries. The first one is teaching. We'll see that God does teach Adam, and then we see modeling. That's actually the first thing that Adam experiences. And then the last one is integration. So the first thing that Adam experiences is that he just wakes up in this ordered universe and he experiences the blessing of fruit trees that exist. Why? Because space was created for them to be able to thrive. That there's beauty. Why? Because there is, again, I'm being a little bit repetitive here, but there's a unique space given to all these things in God's ordered universe. And in that unique space, they have the ability to be their unique selves and to express something unique of God's character to the world. And Adam's just like walking in this universe and like, this is amazing. And so it's being modeled first for him, the beauty of boundaries. And so the next thing that God does is he begins to teach through practical application. And so he says, you've seen all this stuff, you've experienced all this stuff. I'm kind of reading into the text here, right? But the next thing God does is he said, let's name the animals. And so Adam has already, he already has beliefs. He already has emotions, and he has behavior. That's just inherent. That's just something he has by nature, right? And so now he's being given God isn't hovering over him and controlling him and saying, do this, do that. He is inviting him and giving him an opportunity to exercise his own beliefs. He's giving him the space to exercise healthy emotional awareness and behavior responsibility so that he can take ownership of himself and be a blessing to God's world. So, what does he do? Let's name the animals. And so we can dive into, the meaning of a name, but essentially names, according to the Bible, that it's not just a name, a name encapsulates the purpose and identity and meaning behind the thing that you're naming. And so when Adam is naming it, what he's essentially doing, he's saying, this is your place within God's ordered universe. This is who you are, right? Just as God did the same thing within taking ownership of himself, then didn't say, you know what, I'm just going to keep this myself and be selfish. He said, I'm going to bless creation with order, starting from taking responsibility over my own behavior, emotions, and beliefs. I'm going to then let that be expressed outside of me to the world around me to bless it. And so then he gives Adam this same opportunity. Here we see how the development of boundaries is then shared to somebody else, is that it is an invitation. First, it's modeled. People experience the beauty of it. Then there's teaching. And then there is integration, that Adam is now not just seeing it modeled around him. Now he's not just doing and following the teaching that God is giving him, but then he's beginning to actually, through hands-on experience, receive something that is deeply true about the universe around him. But because he's experiencing it firsthand through his own choice, it's now being integrated within himself. And so the last component, sharing how to develop healthy boundaries, consequences, healthy consequences. So God creates, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and you also have the tree of life. And in this is not necessarily, like I set this up because I want you to fail, but it is a picture of reality. That when you choose to follow after God's ways, when you choose to follow after wisdom, when you choose to follow after wise and intelligent boundary setting, when you follow that, there's thriving. But then when you choose to take knowledge for yourself and determine the right way, there's breakdown. And God teaches this through consequences. He says, okay, if you're going to choose to do things on your own, then you're not going to be able to enjoy what I've created, but you will have to be separated from this place because it's what you've chosen. Humanity isn't exactly up against God, which we are when we disagree and try to do things our own way, that we're really coming up against and fighting against just reality, God's ordered universe. God is simply saying, if you want to do things your way, then you can't be in my garden. Like, I do things my way. See, here is an expression of healthy boundaries, is that God is saying, this is kind of the place that I've created. I have, parameters in which this garden thrives, and I'm welcoming you into this place, and I'm inviting you to conduct yourself in the same way. But since this is my property, if you don't want to be in my house, in my property, my domain, my way, well, then you don't have to be, and you can do your thing somewhere else. That's actually called hell. Like that is the biblical description of hell, is if you don't want to do things like my way, like I will give you a space in which you can continue to do things your way, the way you want to, on your own time and in your own space. And that's called hell. And that is really just a natural consequence to the decisions that we make. And on this side of eternity, God wants our, choices to be instructive to us. The consequences of our decisions are to be instructive. And so God is saying, okay, I have this tree that if you take from it and you choose, then I'm going to separate you outside of the garden because you don't want to do things my way, since this is my property and I've kind of constructed this my way. This is how I run things. And if you don't want to, then you can do that outside. And that's exactly what happens, is that they take from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and then they begin to make decisions based on their own terms. And so God's like, if you want to make your own decisions based on your own terms, and you can create your own world apart from me. But God, since he is love, right, that he doesn't just quit there and say you can just suffer, because he understands the value of his own character, and he understands the potential of humanity. Because God is love, he's not just going to throw it away, right? And that's something that as Christians, as followers of Jesus, that when we develop that belief system of love, that we act not because we're ashamed if we don't, or because we don't want to go to hell, but because we understand the value of who God is and the order that he brings to the universe. We understand the value of love. We understand the great honor of carrying his name, of carrying his character and his worldview to the world around us, and the great benefit and joy that it is to creation and to ourselves. And so we do that willingly. And so that, again, right, that is someone who has a healthy set of boundaries, because they have taken ownership of their beliefs, that they have taken ownership of their emotions and their behavior. And God, how did he do that? That he first took inventory of those three things in of himself, and because of those things, he acted and created the ordered universe. And then he creates mankind, and then now mankind has opportunity to follow suit. And now we have a picture of what it looks like to share and instruct somebody and how to operate themselves in God's universe. That God doesn't just force them, he isn't controlling, and he doesn't develop compliant people who are always at his beck and call. He might be the God of the universe, and he does instruct them through modeling and through teaching, giving him some direction, but then he gives Adam the liberty to exercise creativity and to learn through trial and error, right? And to experience for himself and to begin to integrate these truths for himself, right? So now Adam's beginning to develop boundaries for himself. And then there are also consequences. So he invites Adam into this, and Adam gets to experience it. He's integrating it. But then he says, if you want to do things your way, this will be the consequence, because I've created this space to be a certain way. And if you don't want to exist in this, you can do your way out here. And then that is when Adam chooses with Eve to do things outside of God's prescribed order, so that they can do their thing outside of Eden. And that then becomes instructive to humanity. We can go to the 10 Commandments or the 10 words of God. It's the same thing, is that God is inviting them into a relationship. He's saying, hey, this is kind of my universe, my everything. Look at what I've done. Look at how I've operated myself, and look at the blessing and the joy and the beauty that comes from this. You want to be a part of it? And they're like, yeah. And so then he gives them the 10 words to say, hey, within this right here, this framework, this is with the space within life thrives. And so people are invited into that, to experience that, and then they begin to develop healthy boundaries, right? And after they develop healthy boundaries, then they own it, they integrate it, they enjoy it. But people who step outside of that, it creates chaos or disorder. The system repeats itself. It recycles, it's rinse, repeat. I guess going backwards, that is the process in how to help others develop healthy boundaries without becoming controlling and without hurting people to where they want to become avoidant. And this is also how you help avoidance get out of their shell, is that you show them, you invite them that there is the potential to live outside of hurt and pain, that when people have healthy boundaries, we don't hurt one another, and that you can let down those walls. You can open up the door, and people who are non-responsive, who just want to, say, I'll never feel again, and they resent and hate people who have emotions and understand their need. It's like, hey, when you live this way, it's actually healthy, you thrive. So this is how you break down the unhealthy boundary patterns, is by modeling it, is by modeling healthy boundaries and then inviting them in, teaching, giving them an opportunity to integrate that into themselves. And then when experiencing the benefit of that, then what happens? Repentance. True repentance. People fall in love with Jesus. They begin to do things his way. And I believe ultimately that is what Jesus means. People will see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Jesus is on the Sermon on the Mount is just establishing what healthy boundaries is, inviting people into that and saying, hey, when you do it, man, those who are humble and who are wise will want to do it too. That includes the teaching on what healthy boundaries look like, first describing, God himself, and then how to impart healthy boundaries to other people in a way that is healthy and not controlling or developing compliant people. So God bless. I hope that was encouraging, and may we grow in confidence and courage and quiet dignity day by day. See you later.